Mark Hayner and Lindsay Noonan. They're going to share some tips and tricks, ways you guys can leverage LinkedIn and its capabilities as a college student, and hopefully make sure that your profile is in tip-top shape when you guys are searching for internships, the job search, all that fun stuff. So I'm going to let them take it away.
Sure. Hi guys, my name is Lindsay Noonan. As Mandy mentioned, I'm actually a USD alum, so I graduated in '09. It's nice to be back here. I was telling Mark that when I was in school, I actually was in the other business school, so this is beautiful. You guys are spoiled. So, I've been with LinkedIn for about 2 years. My title is Relationship Manager, basically a sales rep for products that are actually separate from the free site that you guys all know. We have products that help our customers post jobs, recruit candidates like you to fill their open positions. So that's kind of my role.
And I'm Mark, as mentioned. I'm not an alum. I'm from Oregon, so any Western Oregon University fans? No? Okay, well, that's where I went to school. And I lead our sales teams at LinkedIn in Omaha. So there's 5 teams there. And I have responsibility for ensuring all those folks do really well. Lindsay's on one of those teams. As Lindsay mentioned, our goal is to ensure you guys understand kind of the hacks or the tricks to making LinkedIn work for you, especially as you leave the university and go into the workforce and you're trying to prepare yourself for those opportunities. So we have about 10 tips, but the idea here is for this to be really conversational. So interrupt, ask questions, question if the advice I'm giving you makes sense or not. This is totally an open forum, so don't feel like this is really formal. So any questions about LinkedIn as a company or a site before we go into some advice and hacks and stuff like that? Who has a profile they're proud of? All right, a handful. Who has a profile they're embarrassed of? Couple, brave souls.
Thank you.
Who doesn't have a profile? Okay, so who didn't raise their hand? Because you're trying to figure out which bucket you're in. Well, by the end of this, you should all have something and some advice that you can be proud of so that the whole room would raise their hands and feel really confident in what they have on LinkedIn. Lindsay was kind enough to decide to put my mug on the screen, so
That's a really good profile, that's why.
as an example, part of working at LinkedIn means you have to do all this stuff right, so I hope I pass the test. But as students versus as professionals, LinkedIn kind of has a dual purpose. As students, the idea is to showcase all this time and effort and investment you've made in your education and the experience before you enter your formal career for most. So I'm going to orient my advice around a student profile versus a professional's profile that has years of experience. Unfortunately, I'm a few years out of school, so mine's more tailored towards the latter, but I'll try to bridge some gaps along the way. And like I said, please interrupt with questions. So the first thing about any profile on LinkedIn is your photo. So there's this other huge social network that I assume everyone's on, Facebook, and not so many rules around your profile photo. And then you have LinkedIn, which is representative of you as a professional or as a graduating student or someone who is wanting to represent an aspect of their life. So with your profile pictures, we have a couple of key guidelines that make a good profile picture. One is to make sure it's high quality, high resolution, clear. Anything from an iPhone photo to a professional headshot will work, but you definitely don't want some like fuzzy, overscaled, pixelated image that does not represent a really polished brand. The other thing you want to focus on is make it a headshot, kind of shoulders and head. You don't want to have, like a party going on in the background or like cutting a friend out who your arm's around and it looks weird. Make it an intentional headshot. So for the first several years after I was out of school, I was starting my career working at Yahoo at the time. And my profile photo was me and a buddy, the only time I'd ever wore a suit jacket, I think, and had a picture taken at a wedding. And under the photo, of course, we were both like doing wedding stuff, right? And we chopped it off. And a friend of mine went to work for LinkedIn in Omaha. And he was looking at my profile as a part of his recruiting of me. He said, dude, we got to get your profile picture fixed. It's clear you're at a wedding. You're wearing a bow tie. You never wear a bow tie to work. That's not even your industry. Let's get it kind of representative of what you do. So that's the third piece of advice is if you're not someone who walks around in a sport coat and a tie all the time, you don't need to have that in your profile photo. This is the way I dress literally 364 days a year, is in some sort, I think that's even the shirt. In a button down and a sweater or a vest or something like that. So I'm not in a sport coat in my picture because this is me in front of clients and big meetings, not the way I walk around every day. So be yourself. It doesn't have to be overly formal, but make sure it's clear, high quality, and somewhat professional or somewhat representative of how you want to be seen by those you wish to impress down the road. Questions on profile pictures? That was a lot of information on something simple. No? Okay. As we work our way down a profile, you have a headline and a summary. So this area just below my name is my title and then a headline, which is the part after the hyphen. So I chose something that's on brand with the company I work with because that's a major part of my professional identity right now. You may have something that's really personal to you, such as a nonprofit organization that you spend a lot of time with, or a sports team that you're a part of, or something like that. Your headline can incorporate anything you want. It can even be a one-liner that just says, like, I'm really excited to do big things with my career. It doesn't have to be, anything marketing related or school related. It can just be about you. But it's a short one sentence that gives someone a link into who you are and what you care about. And then you have this whole summary section, which can be as short as you want or as long as you want. We have a recommendation. I think that is something like 200 characters at minimum, so that there's some substance to it. So think of a short paragraph at least. And this describes in more detail about that headline most typically. So if there's a connection between those things and it expresses who you are, why you are the way you are, and what you care about, it will be a really strong summary. Who has recently done a resume? Okay, more than have profiles. In that resume, normally at the top of most formats, there's a small paragraph or a couple of words linked together with bullet points or something that describe your characteristics. Think of this as something similar to that. Questions on headlines or summaries or anything of that nature?
How long did you say the career summary should be?
250 characters is kind of the minimum that we would suggest. Again, that's just so there's enough substance. If you have a sentence or two, it looks kind of half-baked. And if it's overly long, like maybe one on the screen, people aren't going to read the whole thing.
For you guys, it might make sense to, like, if you have a cover letter, that content can go here. So don't overthink it like you have to recreate something. You can take that information that you've already put together and add it into the summary section.
Yeah, anything you would add on the headline? Maybe a different view
No,
of
I
it?
think, like, for you guys, as you start to transition into, like, having a career, you may change that a couple times, and that's okay. So just understand it's a working document. I didn't actually have one until I started at LinkedIn, and I was like, why wasn't I doing this? But it's just a way to get kind of creative with who you are in just one sentence, couple words.
There's another piece, if we can scroll back up for a moment, which you can see next to my picture and description where it lists my current company, the university I went to. There's an ability to access contact information and any connections. I want to skip all the way down to the bottom of the education portion. And this is a super simple thing you can do. You can do all this from your phone, but it's super simple, which is to include your university. There's an option for an end date or for present. You can even expand and choose your school that you're within. For instance, if you're in the School of Business, you can choose that instead of the general university. But highlighting your university or your schooling is incredibly important. Something you've probably heard about from your professors is the alumni network you're eventually going to be a part of and how much opportunity that presents itself. It's like a mini explanation of what LinkedIn's going to do for you on a global scale. So you're going to have, with every piece of information you enter on your profile, you're connecting with individuals that can relate to that. The simplest thing you can do is connect with alumni based on your university. There are people that went to my school that have gone on to do amazing things. It's been incredible just to be able to, on that premise alone, ask them a question and get access to someone that has no reason for answering my email. So highlight your university. It shows very prominently at the top. And then you can include high school like I did, and some other details which we'll get into in a moment. Anything you would add around education?
No, I think that's good.
I'll add one thing real quick. That's actually how these guys got here today, because I went on, searched in LinkedIn, and looked at USD alum who work at LinkedIn in Omaha. So that's how I got to Nate and Lindsay. So you can, if you're interested in working for a company, that's a way that you can make connections as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, good call out.
most certainly. So if we can go back up to the experience section. Experience is a really interesting section because, like a resume, you can fill the body of your profile with whatever content you want. So who's worked on a formal project or a team or volunteer work or something like that that they're super proud of? Couple of shy hands, okay? So that can go in experience. If you worked, so I was in Boy Scouts as a kid. I wasn't good enough to be an Eagle Scout, but there were people I know that did awesome stuff. I've seen people put Eagle Scout projects in here that didn't have a ton of work experience. I've seen people put sorority projects that they worked on with their house in here that didn't have a ton of work experience. This is the body where people go to read and see what you can do. There are volunteer sections that some of that information shifts to as you gain professional experience over time, but anything in this section that we're going to go through for the next several minutes can include those different sort of formal or informal items that have helped you develop the skills and the mindset you have today or in the future. So speaking of skills, if we can go down, I'm going to kind of bounce all over.
That's
Does
good.
it make sense? Skills and endorsements. This section is like, I don't know how I would say this. It's the most subjective to your style out of all the profiles, if you will. So you get to write all the other content yourself, so it's your own voice. But here you get to choose how to label yourself if you were to be only bullet points on a paper. There used to be the ability actually where you could type in anything you want and make it a skill. We've since removed that because we have almost 600 million people with LinkedIn profiles now. And that would be a lot of different kind of funny things. So for instance, I've seen goat herding as a skill on someone's profile. I don't know if that's a real skill, I'm sure it is, but I don't know that that belonged with a computer software guy. But I say that kind of jokingly, but you can literally choose whatever skills you want, and you can order them however you want. The benefit of putting skills on your profile is those you know get to go and hit this plus button next to you and add a tally to that. So Lindsay can go on here, and I hope you will, click these plus buttons and see these little numbers. That shows how many people say, yeah, I vouch that that person's good at those things. And it automatically will order them from greatest to least endorsed skills. But you then can reshuffle those. So you may be attempting to be a salesperson, for instance, or attempting to be an engineer. And you want to add that to your profile because you know quite a bit about it from your schooling. And then those in your class that adore how well you know that topic can go in and click that plus button and raise it to the top and show support for you. Again, there are thousands of different skills you can choose from. So choosing many is my personal approach to this, that if I feel they're relevant to me and I know at least one other person that would plus one me on that, I will add it to my profile. Some folks choose to only have a couple that they're really well known for. That's another tactic. But for students, I'd recommend starting with many. You can always remove some. Do you have any thoughts there?
One important thing that I didn't necessarily realize till I joined LinkedIn, but our paid products that are the companies that you guys are going to be interviewing with that purchase our products, our tools are set up with an algorithm to put opportunities in front of you guys based on what skills you have listed on your profile. So the more relevant skills you have, the more relevant job opportunities you're going to start to see in your newsfeed. So just keep that in mind. I think the minimum we say is 5, but like he said, you could come up with a ton. And try and position those as the career that you want to go in as well, so that way it's shown on your profile.
Yeah, great advice. What questions do you guys have about skills? Yeah.
Yes, so I was wondering, what would you suggest is the most effective way for the people to actually endorse you? Because other than asking them, hey, can you go endorse me in this? And I also noticed that, example, for online advertising, you have 46 endorsements. I mean, that shows that your skill in that is very high. Why wouldn't you put that as one of your bullet points, or do you switch it out once you get
Yeah.
something added?
Good question.
Great questions. So I'll start with the first and kind of work my way through them because there were several in there, I think. No problem at all. So how do people endorse you without you walking up and saying, hey, would you endorse me for this skill? Can you scroll up? Does it give you the option on my profile right now? Normally when you go in your feed, it's going to have a bar every, I don't know, page. It'll say endorse these individuals for online advertising. And it will have 4 people that have that skill that I'm connected with that I can go and click endorse, endorse, endorse. Skip the last guy because I think he's a joke. So that's how you can get endorsements. So the key to that working really well for you is to have a healthy number of connections. And we'll talk connections because there's a whole other strategy there in a few minutes. So via your connections, the platform automatically will prompt those to endorse you. They don't have to share that skill, but normally they will have something overlapping. The last question you asked, I believe, and if there was another one, remind me, is why did I put one with a bigger quantity lower than others? This goes back to a point that Lindsay made a few minutes ago, which is this should be representative of who you are and where you would like to go. So I spent about the first 10 years of my career in digital advertising, online advertising. Everyone I was networked with out of school, unless they were a classmate or a friend, came from that world. I shouldn't say graduated, I shifted from that industry into the industry in which I now am a part of, which is advising HR organizations how to hire top talent from schools and other companies and things like that, which still incorporates online advertising. But in my career aspirations, I aim to be known for more than just an industry. I want to be known across industries for the function in which I'm in, which is leading organizations. So you'll see that my top skills, I have leadership, management, and strategy, which are not industry specific. Instead of search engine marketing, pay-per-click advertising, marketing, e-commerce, online advertising, which is where my foundation was laid. Does that make sense?
Yes, it is.
Any other questions?
To kind of piggyback off of what he was asking, is there a professional way to ask for endorsements? I think that's kind of where he was going. Can you reach out for endorsements, or is that kind of frowned upon?
It's absolutely not frowned upon.
Okay.
If you've worked together and you have a relationship, at least an acquaintance with an individual, I would never hesitate to say, if you feel that I am strong in this area, I'd sure appreciate your endorsement. There's a formal way that they can probably do that in more than a plus button that we'll talk about here next, actually. So I'll pause on the rest of that answer till we get there,
Okay.
and then follow up if I can be more clear.
Sometimes people will endorse you for things that you don't like and you don't think are a strength. Is there any way to delete their endorsements?
Absolutely. If it's a new skill that you haven't yourself listed, you have to approve that being published on your profile. So I made the goat herding joke earlier. There was one that was far more silly, made to me by an ex-colleague that I deleted because I didn't want it on my professional brand. Now, if you've added that and people are just adding quantity, you're not going to receive that request to approve or deny, but you will receive notification that someone has endorsed you. Lindsay, if we go over the number, does it show all the people? I can't remember. I know it shows a highlight here up above, but uh-oh, we broke the internet. That's what happens if you don't want the internet.
All right.
Can we go to yours?
Yeah, let's try. Might try a different browser.
That might be, if you go back to that email, it might make you
Here you go.
It's good now?
should be.
While that's going, any other questions on some of the stuff we've shared so far?
So you were talking about the student, or the experience section, so,
Yeah.
like, Delta Sigma Pi co-sponsored this event. Is that someplace that they could put some student organization, like projects, events?
Absolutely. I don't know if you have any organizations listed on yours below your experience. So below all these items that are career, and then if you go down further education, furthermore, keep going, maybe up, right here. There's a section that sits right on this little line that is volunteer work and organizations. So I serve on a board for Make-A-Wish Foundation for Nebraska. And in there I have listed that I work with Make-A-Wish, and I can choose that entity, which then makes me a part of a whole nother network, and discuss what I do. If I'm a part of a student organization, I can add that in there. Again, you're connecting yourself with other folks that have shared that experience with you, either before, during, or after your time, and connect yourself with them also. That is an often overlooked but incredibly important part of a profile. Every employer is seeking to hire not only great people at their job, but more importantly, great people that they want to spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day with. And the biggest part of that is, well, I enjoy standing next to Lindsay for all that time and traveling with Lindsay all the time. If I didn't, it's going to be a really uncomfortable work experience for both of us. So seeing everything that makes that person who they are is a part of the interview process. And ensuring that I'm going to enjoy that individual is certainly important. Every company has a culture. Some are stronger, some are weaker, some are more prominent, some are less. But there's a culture there that they want to make sure is always growing and improving and becoming healthier. And those sort of things determine if you're going to be someone who adds or fits with that culture. Let's skip to referrals. So you asked a question earlier about more formally suggesting that someone is great at something or you endorse them as an individual. There's those plus buttons I mentioned earlier, but then there's these recommendations. Think of these as like a letter of recommendation, LinkedIn style. On here you can see that Chuck and Jillian have both written really kind things about Lindsay based on their work together. These are from 2 different industries, it looks like, 2 different people, and presumably 2 different cities.
Yep.
So there's a diversity aspect here, albeit based on industry and location, but a diversity aspect that shows that no matter where Lindsay goes, she has a positive impact on those she works with or works with as a client, employer, colleague, whatever the case may be. So professors that you have a great relationship with, there is absolutely no shame in going to them and asking, would you be willing to write me a recommendation? Just like you would for a letter of recommendation before you go into an interview. I like to use that as my litmus test on if I should ask someone or not. If they are someone who I have respect for, that I would want to be publicly represented by, and if they are someone that I believe respects me, I will ask them for a recommendation. So if Lindsay were to go work at another company tomorrow, I would send her a note. There's a tool here where it says ask for recommendations. Say, Lindsay, would you mind writing me a recommendation about our work together? And hopefully she wouldn't say no.
Hopefully I wouldn't leave my current employer.
Well, that's also true.
Yeah.
So did that help clarify a little bit for you?
For sure.
For
Awesome.
those of you guys that are making resumes, you probably are creating a list of references. Ask those people to write a recommendation for you as well. They're probably going to get a phone call, but you already have some of the work done already by identifying those people. Now just asking them to help you build out your profile is really easy.
Connections?
Yeah. Do you have more or do I have more?
I don't even know if my profile's still up. You have more than 500 too, so let's leave it at we both have more.
Okay.
So, in the room, who can guess what the #1 thing is people do on LinkedIn?
Look at mutual connections.
Mutual connections? You're 50% right.
Look at how many connections.
Getting colder.
Connect?
Connect? Yeah. People creep each other's profiles. So like Facebook and all the other social networks, they're all going and they're looking at the pictures and they're reading about people and then they're seeing who they know, like you said, mutual connections. Then they're looking at those people and then they're looking at those people. And people spend, I forget how much time it is on each profile, but the #1 thing they do is look at profiles, and the most looked at thing is the picture. So, building a connected network on LinkedIn that is representative of people that you've engaged with is incredibly important because that just continuously amplifies how many people will see your profile. So imagine if you only handed one resume to one employer versus if you gave a resume to every employer in town. A lot more people would know you with the latter, obviously, right? So this is the same idea. There are two schools of thought from my perspective, and I'd like you to weigh in because we come from different backgrounds in this,
Yeah.
in building a connection network. My school of thought, which is going to be opposite of Lindsay's in some ways, is if someone passed me in the street and they knew me by name, I would connect with them. So, Mandy and I were not connected until after several conversations, meeting in person, and then continuing our work together. At the first email, I didn't send her a connection request, nor did she send me one, because we were just in email one time back and forth. I have people in my network that doesn't hold true for, but that's my guiding light. If I would see someone and they would know me by name, I would connect with them. Now, there are people that would know me by name that I would not connect with because they're not representative of who I am as a professional, but that's beside the point. So then, there's a different strategy which includes growing a much larger network that maybe Lindsay can talk about by way of her previous work.
Yeah, so I spent about 6 years prior to working at LinkedIn as an agency recruiter. So I was hired by other companies to find them candidates, and specifically it was in engineering. I knew nothing about engineering. So what I did was I connected with other engineers and would ask them for lunch or coffee just so I could ask them what they did. And that turned out being really beneficial because then when I was posting opportunities, I was looking for a mechanical engineer. Those people that I met with or connected with were sharing that out to their network, which was full of engineers, right? So I think I have like 4,500 connections. It's very ridiculous. I'm not in recruiting anymore, so kind of wish that I would have less because now my news feed is filled with all of those people's content that they're posting. But I think it depends on the line of work that you're in. For me, when I was in recruiting, it was like perfect. It was very helpful to have a lot of connections. So I think you can go either way depending on where you guys are headed.
Yeah, I want to be super clear. Hers is not worse or better than mine, and mine is not worse or better than hers. So, question.
Is there a way we can tailor our homepage essentially that other people's news feeds keep coming on that we want, we don't want?
Yeah, you can follow and unfollow content, which then you determine, but your connections will be a majority of your content, the stuff they like and share. We are, as a platform, increasingly becoming more specific to your preferences that we see by way of things you engage with and skip past. So over time, in a lot of use of LinkedIn, you should see a more and more relevant newsfeed, just like Facebook does, and homepages on places like Yahoo do and things like that.
So, for the student audience here, I know we regularly have grads who go to work for GPAC, which is a recruiting firm in Sioux Falls. So would it be advantageous for all of them to connect with their former classmates who are now working for a recruiter? Would that help them in their career search?
Yeah, your question leads right to the next piece I was going to go to, which is as students entering the workforce, so to speak, there is a lot of benefit in connecting with folks on a much broader strategy than what I personally shared. And the reason for that is you're going to want to have more opportunities and more people to connect with to start down the path in which you've spent the last several years studying and attending class for. So with that example in particular, 100% I would recommend it. There is a communication platform on LinkedIn called Messages, just like Facebook and everyone else has. And my second piece of advice that goes with that is if someone reaches out and wants to have a conversation about a potential career opportunity, I can think of very few instances in which you should ever say no. Every conversation is worth a cup of coffee, hopefully it's free, and a potential career opportunity that could change the game for you. I like to share a story with this, and that when I graduated school in 2007, I went to school to be a history teacher. I was interviewing to be a high school history teacher under my father, who's a high school principal. And I ended that interview, and at the same time, a friend of mine who was a distant colleague from like the other side of the back of the class in my history courses was a contractor for Yahoo at the time. She sent me a message and said, "Hey, I think you could get a job at Yahoo, we're hiring, and if you do, I'll split my sign-on bonus with you." I was like, okay, I'll take $500. So I applied, interviewed. Yahoo called me the day before David Douglas High School called me, offered me the job, I took it, and now I've had a 12-year career leading in tech companies. And never once have I looked back and said, man, I really wish I was working under my dad as a high school history teacher. Now my life goal is to retire early and be an adjunct history professor at a small school somewhere. So I haven't lost the love for the work. I am glad that I took the shift I took because it's been a great career for me. So take that phone call, have that cup of coffee, humor an interview that you may be skeptical of if it's aligned with something you have interest in, and make those connections on a broad path to begin with, because you never know what it shapes in your life. So a lot of people out there looking to bring people they know into career opportunities. Any other questions? We're getting some good ones. Yeah.
So one thing I was always curious about is when you look at your other connections, you can see a first or second in that. However, you can't see yourself. What those numbers represent, or how important are those?
Yeah. So your first degree connections are people, like if you and I connected with each other on LinkedIn today, first degree connections. We know each other face to face. Second degree would be if you're connected with him and he and I are connected, you and I are indirectly connected. And then third degree would be, and this works well since you're all sitting in the diagonal, if you're connected to him, he's connected to him, and only he and I are connected. I don't have visibility to you because you're 2 degrees removed. So in smaller cities, for instance, take Omaha for example, a lot of people in the recruiting world or the talent world there consider Omaha Metro a second degree city, which means normally every person you meet, we both know the same person somewhere. That is to your advantage of a bigger network, as we discussed earlier. Whereas in a huge city, that doesn't really matter as much because you're not always going to run into the same people. So that's the definition of first, second, third. Your third degree network right now, despite if you have 5 connections or 500, is still huge because of the kind of pyramid of the way it builds out. Would you add any thoughts?
No, it's good.
Awesome. So a couple of other things to highlight, and then just open conversations from here on out. If you notice at the top, it says linkedin.com/in/Lindsay-Noonan. That's not automatic. She went in there and created that. I've done the same thing. I encourage all of you to do the same thing. Now, if your name is Michael Smith, you may be challenged to be the first Michael Smith. So you may have to add a number, like with an email address or something like that. I've seen people put on their most amazing recruiter in the world as their unique URL. The key is to have something that's yours, because you're going to put this in emails to people eventually. Recruiters are going to share this with hiring managers eventually. And the simpler and more memorable it is, the better for you, because if they ever forget, they can go and just type in what they think it is and go straight to your profile. Profiles that are viewed a lot are emphasized a lot in our different programs that allow them to be surfaced for jobs, for search results, and all the other things that the businesses Lindsay and I work